Well, hi there, and welcome to Side Hustle Hero, the podcast that inspires action and helps you to grow your side hustle into a thriving income stream. I'm your host, Joan Posivy. What's your knee-jerk reaction when faced with a problem? Is it, oh boy, another learning opportunity? Or perhaps frustration, anger, disbelief, or maybe a combination of the above? After that initial shock fades, I've got a simple but powerful two-part mindset hack to share that'll power up your problem-solving abilities, especially for those moments when solutions seem elusive. But let's face it, there'll never be a time in our lives when we're completely problem-free. Sometimes we think landing that dream job, finding the perfect side hustle, making a big life change, or receiving a pile of money will magically solve all our problems. No, it won't. So, the smartest way forward, the way to reduce stress and genuinely enjoy life more, is to up your level of problem-solving skills. And this episode is laser focused on doing that. I'm going to be laying out that mindset for you. But first, a quick favor. If there are aspects of this podcast that you enjoy or areas that you think it could improve, I'd love to hear from you. In the episode description, you'll find a link to a short survey. Just 15 seconds of your time will help me tailor the show to what you want. For example, what's your ideal episode length? 15 minutes, 20, 30, 60? Instead of guessing, I'd love to know your thoughts. Your feedback truly matters, and I'm so grateful for it. Okay, now let's dive in. You know how certain stories stick with you? The ones that bubble up over the years for inspiration and encouragement? Well, today, I want to share a story with you that's been a game changer for me, both personally as well as professionally. It perfectly illustrates two shifts in mindset that'll help you solve any problem. Bob Proctor, a giant in the personal development world, was not only a mentor to me, but also a friend. We worked together back in Toronto, and he gave me my first international speaking engagement when we worked together co-presenting some seminars for Malaysian Airlines in Kuala Lumpur. It's from Bob that I first heard this story. If you were to drive from Toronto, Ontario on Highway 400, after about an hour and a half to 2 hours, you'd pass through the town of Barrie. Back in the 1980s, a tornado ripped through Barrie, causing unimaginable devastation. I remember that day vividly because I lived about 20 minutes south of the tornado's path. The destruction was surreal. One moment, everything was untouched, and the next, it looked like a bomb had gone off. But in a very long, clear-cut swath, where there was absolute destruction in the path, then one street over, things were largely untouched. Bob Templeton, who worked for Telemedia Communications at the time, was driving north on Highway 400 through Barrie shortly after the tornado struck. Like many, he was stunned by the devastation. But unlike most people who just stared at it in disbelief, Templeton was determined to help the people of Barrie. At the time, Telemedia owned a string of radio and TV stations in Ontario and Quebec. By the time he reached his office, he wasn't just thinking about what he'd seen. He had a mission. He gathered his team in the boardroom. Once everyone arrived, he closed the door. Then he walked to the front and on the flip chart wrote the number 3 times across the top of the page. Then he turned to them and asked, how would you like to raise $3 million? We'll start 3 days from now, and we'll do it in the span of 3 hours to help the people of Barrie. The room erupted. That's impossible. We can't do that. That's crazy. Templeton cut them off. I didn't ask you if we could. I asked you, do you want to? Well, they all agreed. Yes, of course. It was then that Templeton turned back to the flip chart. He drew a vertical line down the middle. On the left side near the top, he wrote, why we can't. And on the right, he wrote, how we can. Then he said, since we want to do this, we're not going to waste a second on why we can't. There's no value to that. He boldly crossed out the left side of the flip chart with a giant X. Now, he said, we're only going to be focusing on how we can. He said, I don't know how we're going to do it, but we're a smart group of people, and together we're going to figure it out. And we're not going to leave this room until we do. Well, silence filled the room. Some thought Templeton had lost it. It was a crazy idea, a bold challenge, but slowly, ever so slowly, the energy began to shift from disbelief to possibility. Finally, the silence was broken when someone suggested a radio-a-thon. They said, well, like a telethon, but we'll do it over the radio, and we'll get radio stations to join us from across the country. Templeton said, great idea, and wrote it down. But right away, someone said, we can't do that. Radio stations are so competitive. They don't work together. But Templeton said, no, that's one way that we can do this, so that idea stays. What else? Someone else piped up and said, well, we could get high-profile TV personalities like Lloyd Robertson and Harvey Kirk host the radio-a-thon. At the time, those guys were known across the country as top nightly news anchors. Templeton loved the idea and wrote it on the flip chart. But sure enough, the suggestion was met with skepticism when somebody said, those guys are big in TV. They're not going to work on radio. Templeton didn't budge. He said, this is how we can do it. That idea stays. Let's keep brainstorming. Eventually, the momentum grew. Ideas snowballed. 3 days later, they held their radio-a-thon. It involved 60 radio stations across the country, and Harvey Kirk and Lloyd Robertson anchored the show. In just 3 hours, they raised the $3 million. Now let's look at the mindset shifts of problem solving that this story so well illustrates. The first is, shift your thinking from the problem to the solution. The energy of the problem is not the same as the energy of the solution. It's like two sides of the same coin. You can't look at both sides at the same time. That's why Templeton was so determined to get the team off of thinking of all the reasons why they couldn't do it. That would have been a pretty easy and lengthy list to generate, but not helpful. Similarly, if we're stuck focusing on who's to blame or how unfair the situation is, we're not actually working towards a solution. Those thoughts might feel justified in the moment, but they don't move us forward. They keep us spinning in frustration, using up energy that could be directed towards creating a way out. The moment we shift to, what can I do about this? How can I fix this? Is the moment that we reclaim our power. When I've struggled with coming up with a solution and I just can't seem to get there and I want to give up, an evergreen quote nudges me forward. I honestly can't put a price tag on how much it's helped me over the years. It's by Robert Schuller, who wrote many books during his lifetime, but one of my favorites is called Success is Never Ending, Failure is Never Final. And the quote is, when you think you've exhausted all the possibilities, remember this, you haven't. Damn, I love that quote. I have absolutely found that to be true. Many times when I've wanted to give up, Schuller's quote comes to mind, and it immediately causes a shift in my thinking to, okay, what is it that I'm not seeing? What have what have I missed? And slowly, and sometimes really quickly, the way is shown. There is always a solution, provided we're solution-oriented. There's always a way to go around a problem, over it, under it, through it. I think that might be the reason that I love solving puzzles of all different types, because I know that there's a solution, that they are solvable. I just got to figure it out. Face your next problem with that mindset that there is a solution and that you are going to figure it out, because when you think you've exhausted all the possibilities, remember this, you haven't. Write that down. Put it where you can see it. I guarantee you it's a game changer. One final note about that. Sometimes the solution isn't about figuring it out alone. It's about tapping into the knowledge or resources of others, asking for help, seeking advice, or leveraging expertise. Templeton didn't do it alone. In fact, he said, I don't know how, but together we'll figure it out. Your intuition, or gut feeling if you prefer that term, is often the nudge that points you in the right direction to the right person or team or resource. Trust it, and you'll amaze yourself. The second mind shift is reframe your thinking. When you catch yourself saying some form of, I can't do this, I don't know how to solve this, ask instead, if I did know, what would the solution look like? If I were to raise $3 million 3 days from now in the span of 3 hours, how could we do that? This shifts your focus from obstacles to possibilities, tapping into reservoirs and creativity and intuition you didn't even know you had. For example, when I wanted to add a video version to this podcast, I was stuck on how to create a great backdrop. I didn't like the look of the back wall of my studio, and then I didn't have time or desire to redesign the wall. My first solution, a green screen, ended up in what could only be called a disaster, quite literally. I have the burn marks in the fabric from the lighting to prove it. I reframed my thinking by broadening out the question to focus on the end result that I wanted. You see, I thought my only alternative to using the back wall of the studio was a green screen. And I certainly didn't want to use a virtual Zoom background or a blur. That's totally fine for a guest, but in my books, not for the host. So once I got unstuck from thinking it had to be green screen, I opened up to other possibilities with the question, okay, how can I create a good-looking video? I then soon discovered a company that made the exact background to suit my needs. Use this approach for any size problem or challenge, big or small. If, for example, the next time you catch yourself saying, I can't find my keys, reframe your thinking to, if I could locate my keys, where would they be? You'll be amazed at how quickly you find the damn keys. If you don't believe me, try it. I remember one day doing exactly that. I couldn't find my keys anywhere. Frustrated, I reframed my thinking, and as if on cue, I tripped over the corner of my briefcase, landed on the kitchen floor, and right in front of my eyes, there they were, the keys. It was as if the universe was saying, here you go. The power of your mind is incredible. It's sad that it's not more widely taught. Our thoughts truly shape the results that we experience in life. And let me just say that when things start to happen for you, they can happen so fast, at first it'll scare you. And when it stops scaring you, it'll never cease to amaze you. The first time you find your keys by practically falling into them, it might feel a bit eerie. But over time, you come to expect that solutions will present themselves, hopefully with a little more grace and a lot less floor time. Problems are a part of life, but the more skilled you become at solving them, the less they'll rattle you. Think about it. A challenge that might have completely thrown you off 5 years ago, today you face it with confidence and grace. Each experience, each problem solved has sharpened your skills and built your resilience. Keep going, because as you grow more adept at tackling bigger challenges, the opportunities and rewards that come your way, they grow too. And then you'll write your personal version of the 333 story. Your commitment to evolving and growing and stepping up is truly what makes you a side hustle hero. Well, that's a wrap for today. About that survey that I mentioned in the intro, your feedback is incredibly important to me. And you'll notice that at the end, the survey asks for your email. Don't let that stop you from sharing your thoughts. It's there simply as a safeguard to prevent spam submissions. So here's the deal. You can enter your own email or even make one up. It doesn't matter. Either way, rest assured that you won't be added to any list. That's not what the survey is about. It's all about hearing your thoughts so that I can make this podcast even better for you. Thanks again for taking the time to help out. In the description, you'll find links to my book, The Way Success Works, and my course, Turn Your Thoughts into Wanted Things, and a link back to the full show notes, which lives at our website, sidehustlehero.com. If you're enjoying what you're seeing in this podcast, it would be so appreciated if you would take a moment and add your comment. I read every one of them. Share the episode, and please subscribe. It'll let others know that there's valuable content here to help them start or grow their side hustle. Thanks for watching, and hustle on.